Hi, my friends. Welcome into episode 290 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Hey, before we get started today, I want to ask you a question. And actually, before I ask the question, I just want you to promise yourself that you'll answer it honestly. So don't give me the answer that you would give the superintendent or your staff, and certainly not the one you think you need to post on social media. Answer it honestly. Here's the question. As you get ready for another school year, what is it that you are preparing more intentionally for? The building or yourself? Now, don't misunderstand me. I know the building matters. Certainly, there's all kinds of stuff that need to get done. Classrooms need to be ready and schedules need to be finalized. I'm sure you've got student handbooks to get completely ready to go. There's parts of the building like the cafeteria and those kinds of things. You want to make sure that everything is the way you want it to be. There are 1,000 details that are demanding your attention right now. I know, I've been there. But something that I have learned after serving as a building principal for a long time, a superintendent, and now for the last 5 years, spending my days coaching school leaders all over North America, the schools that have the very best year, they're not always the ones that have the prettiest hallways. And they're not necessarily the ones that have the best looking, most organized opening day binders. And they're not even necessarily the ones that have the most smooth opening week. The ones that have the best years, those are the schools where the leaders really worked hard to prepare themselves before they prepared everyone else. Because here's the truth. A building isn't what inspires teachers. A building isn't what calms fears or creates trust. It's people that do that. It's leaders that do that. And if you're going to spend the next couple of weeks preparing every classroom, except for the one that matters most, the classroom between your ears, the classroom right here in your heart, you're going to miss a great opportunity because the reality is you're not preparing the building. You're preparing yourself and your leadership team to lead the people who will make the building successful. That is what today's episode is all about. This isn't about a checklist. It's not another list of opening week activities. There are plenty of those. You can go on social media all over, and there are people who are doling out these, hey, if you just do this or if you just do this. No, that's not what this episode is about. Today, I want to talk about 5 commitments that every principal should make. 5 commitments that I think every single principal should make before the very first teacher walks back through those doors. Now, before we do that, let's take a minute and thank our sponsor for today's episode. This episode is brought to you by Hey Tutor. As school leaders, we all know the pressure to accelerate student learning. It's real. Yet at the same time, we also know our teachers and our leadership team are carrying an incredible amount on their shoulders. That is why I'm so proud to partner with Hey Tutor. Their high-impact tutoring programs help districts provide students with targeted academic support without adding any more to your teachers or your leadership team's already full plates. It's research-based, it's flexible, and it's designed to meet students where they are, all while supporting the goals you've already established for your school. If you are looking for a partner that can help move student achievement forward while allowing your teachers and your team to stay focused on great instruction, I encourage you to learn more about my friends at Hey Tutor. Go to heytutor.com, or even better, go down in the show notes and hit the link. That will let them know you heard about them here on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Now, let's dive into this conversation. Let's talk about these 5 commitments. Let's lean into leadership. You know, one of my favorite parts of the work I do is this time of year, all summer long and into the early fall. Over the last several weeks and over the several weeks to come, I'll be traveling all over the country. It will be more leadership retreats, more administrative team meetings, a handful of convocations, a bunch of principal workshops, even some district leadership sessions. And everywhere I go, man, I get to meet some absolutely incredible leaders that truly care about the people they lead. They're excited. They're hopeful. They just really want to make sure this year can be different. It's very consistent. Everywhere I go, that's what people want. But I also see something else. As early in the year as we are, I see stress. I see lots of stress. The reality is there's this pressure that somehow causes us to think that if we can just organize everything perfectly, the year is just going to magically unfold exactly the way we plan. Well, let me save you a little frustration. It's not going to. Something is going to go wrong. You might have a teacher resign in the first 2 weeks. I hope not, but it could happen. You will have parents who get upset. That's a reality. We all know that's coming. You're going to have transportation issues. You're going to have technology issues. Probably going to have something that causes you to change your schedule, whether that's your day-to-day schedule, your operational schedule, or even your bus schedule. Somebody on your staff is going to say something that they shouldn't have said, and you're going to have to deal with that. Welcome to leadership. Just reality. That's not me being a pessimist. That's just what's going to happen. We all know it, right? The question has never been whether or not challenges are going to come at us as leaders. No, not at all. The question really should be, and the way we should frame the question is, who will I become when those challenges come at me? That's why I think sometimes we focus on the wrong preparation. We are preparing for events when we should be focusing on preparing ourselves. The events are going to come and go. It's the leadership that's going to remain. Let me tell you about when I was a building principal. This time of year, I loved walking through the building before everybody came back. I would honestly go in on a Sunday when I knew staff was going to come back that next Monday, and I would just go walk the building on my own. And there was something very special about it, something that just, I don't know, brought goosebumps to my arms. It does it now while I'm thinking about it. The hallways are quiet. You can smell the freshly waxed floors, right? To me, that's one of the absolute coolest things. And I know it sounds so nerdy of me, but I loved the smell of the freshly waxed floors. You could almost feel the anticipation in the building. It was palpable, and yet there was no one there. And I would find myself walking the halls looking for details, making sure everything got finished. Are there enough chairs to match the desks in every room? Did maintenance get all those projects that I had asked for before the summer began? Were they done? Were those things all completed? I'd love to go and just stand by the main office. And what does that feel like? Is it welcoming? Those things matter so much. I mean, they absolutely do. But if I'm honest, as I reflect back, there were years that I spent way more time thinking about completed murals and bulletin boards and projects in the hallways than I did thinking about my own leadership. I knew exactly what the opening faculty meeting was going to look like. I mean, heck, I'd built that agenda weeks before we got to it. But I hadn't really thought about, how do I want to make people feel in that meeting? The PowerPoint was ready, but I hadn't thought about my mindset. I knew what I wanted to communicate, but I hadn't necessarily considered how I wanted to lead. And I think looking back, I don't regret at all the preparation for the building and the staff meeting and those kinds of things. Not at all. However, I think I regret assuming that preparing the building meant I was preparing myself as a leader, because those things aren't the same. One of those things gets the school ready, but the other focuses on getting the leader ready. And only one of those is going to have the ability to shape culture every single day. Spoiler alert, it's not getting the building ready. That's why I want to share with you in this episode 5 commitments that matter so much. I think these truly make a difference and set every leader who follows them up for success. And they're not magic. They're not guaranteed to set you up for success. But I do think they will position you to lead intentionally instead of reactively. So let's go. The first commitment: decide what matters most. Man, if I could sit down with every principal in America this week, I would ask them one simple question. What are your top 3 priorities this school year? Not 20, not 15, 3. Because you'd be amazed how often leaders will struggle with that question. And it's not because they haven't thought about it. It's not because in their own mind, they're not thinking they need to have clear priorities. Not at all. It's everything feels important, especially right now when most of you are back. You've had your district level meetings and you've had even more stuff brought at you. A new strategic plan, a new initiative, a new communication platform, a new curriculum rollout, whatever it is. There's so much that it's hard for leaders to say, these are my top 3 priorities, because everything feels important. And when everything is important, nothing is truly prioritized. I mean, for me, years ago, I thought leadership meant saying yes to everything, right? Maybe being on every committee or being in every meeting or solving every problem or, saying yes to every request. I thought availability was leadership. And in reality, that's just exhaustion. Really what it becomes is distraction. There was one point in time, I remember I was sitting in my office one afternoon, and this was a little ways into the school year. But there's a reason I tell this story. This will link back to why you have to decide what your top priorities are now. I'd gotten a few weeks into the school year and I'm sitting in my office that afternoon and I'm thinking, man, I have been busy all day. And in fact, I think at this point I was eating my lunch and it was like 2:15. We've all been there. I'm thinking, man, I've been so busy today. And I really don't think I've accomplished a single thing that is actually moving this school forward. Not at all. Have you ever had one of those days? You know what I'm talking about. From the time you walk in the door, it's constant interruptions. It's somebody who needs you for this and somebody needs you for that. And then here comes a few discipline issues. And then your secretary's like, hey, we've got a couple of purchase orders I need you to sign. And you've got a meeting across town. And ultimately, you're just putting out fires. Sorry, that's probably stressing you out. Ultimately, you drive yourself home that night and you think, man, I really didn't accomplish a single thing. I really am not leading right now. That's why we have to be clear about those priorities. We can't just simply run around chasing fire after fire, because leadership's not measured by activity. Your leadership really is measured by impact. One of the principals that I coach recently said something to me that really made me smile. We were sitting and having a conversation thinking about last year and the differences between last year and where he's going this year. This is his second year as the principal in this particular building. And he said, Darrin, what I'm afraid of is that about 3 weeks in, I'm going to lose sight of my priorities. And I said, I don't think you will. And he looked surprised. And then I said, you're not going to lose them. You'll abandon them one interruption at a time, because that's how it happens. Nobody wakes up in October and says, hey, you know what? I don't think I want to focus on instructional leadership anymore. Nope. Instead, it's the one parent meeting that becomes 3. It's the one staffing issue that becomes 5. It's one emergency after another. And before long, your calendar, the way you spend your time, ends up making the decisions that your leadership should have been making all along. So let's do an exercise. Let's imagine that I followed you around school for the entire first month. Or if you don't want me there, let's put a drone following you the entire first month of school. Myself or that drone attend every meeting, walk behind you all day long, and watch where your attention went. We look at your calendar, listen in on your conversations. Well, at the end of that 30 days, what would we conclude are your priorities? Let's say that we sit down together and we download that video from the drone. What will we conclude are your priorities? Don't tell me the things you wrote on your school improvement plan. That not what you told your superintendent in your post-evaluation at the end of last year. Well, let's talk about what your leadership actually revealed, because where you spend your time tells the truth. Your leadership behaviors are going to tell the truth. Your attention will tell the truth. Your presence tells the truth. So before your staff returns, decide what truly matters the most and then protect it. Not everything is important. I'll say that again. Not everything is important. But your school certainly deserves a leader who focuses on what is really important. Your school deserves a leader who refuses to let the urgent crowd out the things that matter the most. That's why commitment 1 is so important. Let's talk about commitment number 2. Align your leadership team before you lead your staff. Yeah, something that I see schools do every year in August is assume that because the leadership team likes each other, that they're in alignment. Look, those two things aren't the same thing. I worked on leadership teams that laughed together and had lunch together and went and spent time outside of the office together, genuinely enjoyed each other. And yet we were unintentionally creating confusion throughout the building. The reason why? We hadn't really truly aligned our leadership. We had one assistant principal who handled behavior one way while another handled it a completely different way. We had a principal who communicated one expectation, but then somebody else communicated another. Our teachers weren't frustrated because the leaders didn't agree. They were frustrated because they didn't know which leader actually represented our true expectations as a school. So something that I've said to school leaders and leadership teams all summer long is your teachers don't experience your leadership one administrator at a time. They experience your leadership team. Yeah, they experience your leadership team. They experience consistency or inconsistency. They experience clarity or they experience confusion. They experience unity or they experience mixed messages. So before your staff returns, sit down together. Get clear around things that matter. Things like, how will we respond when our teachers need support? How are we going to communicate difficult decisions? How will we internally handle disagreements? What language are we going to use on a consistent basis? Here's one. What expectations are non-negotiable? In other words, what are the things we absolutely have to see from everybody who's a part of the organization, including us on the leadership team? Maybe even think about where might teachers unintentionally be getting mixed messages from us? Those conversations really matter. You see, you don't create alignment in the middle of a crisis. You create alignment before it ever happens. I think for leadership teams, it's important to know that healthy disagreement, there's nothing wrong with that, but it belongs behind closed doors. You need to be unified in front of your staff. That doesn't mean that you pretend to agree. It means that you commit to the decision once it's made, whether that's what you wanted to do or not. You commit to the decision collectively as a team. Your teachers should never have to figure out which administrator they're talking to before they know what the answer might be. They simply deserve consistency and clarity, and a leadership team that models exactly what collaboration should look like. When that happens, trust really grows. Not overnight, but steadily over time. Those consistent interactions build trust. Now, let's talk about something that every principal spends hours planning, and almost nobody plans in the right order: the opening staff meeting. If you have ever built the agenda before you create the PowerPoint, before you decide who's going to present what, there's one question I believe every principal should answer first. How do you want your staff to feel when they walk out of that opening staff meeting? That takes us to point number 3, commitment number 3. Design the experience before you design the agenda. Think back. What's the best professional development you've ever attended? I will bet it wasn't the one that had the most slides or the fanciest handout. There's one you still remember. Do you know why? I'm certain that it was not because the presenter covered more bullet points than you could possibly imagine. And I'm certain that it's not because they covered an insane amount of content. You probably remember it because of how it made you feel. Because when you left it, you were believing in something, or you were looking at something a little differently, or maybe you just left feeling energized. You were like, yes, that is what I needed. So now think about your opening day staff meeting. How much time do we spend asking, what all do we need to tell them? Instead of asking, what do we want them to experience? Very different questions. One of them produces an agenda, the other creates culture. Certainly, I know the temptation and I know the reality. You have all of these things you have to cover. Right? You've got new initiatives. You've got all of your standard operating procedures that you need to talk about. You've got to talk about emergency drills. You've got to talk about schedule and any technology updates, all of those kinds of things. right? And before long, as a team, you have created a 4-hour meeting that is just like drinking out of the fire hose. In fact, I would tell you, you've created a 4-hour meeting that is the exact opposite of what you want your teachers to do when they're in the classroom. Okay, here's the reality. Your teachers don't need you to impress them with how much content you can deliver. What they need is they need to leave believing that they are part of a team that truly values them. Well, let's remember who's walking into the building for that opening staff meeting. You're going to have some teachers who are super excited. Some who are absolutely brand new, maybe to the profession, maybe to your building, maybe to your district and your community. You have some who are going to walk in the door that are exhausted before it even starts. Some of them are coming off a fantastic summer, while others spent their summer caring for aging parents or welcoming a new infant into their lives, or maybe they even lost a loved one. Some of them are questioning, is this the last year for me? Can I even make it through this one? See, the reality is we don't know everybody's story. We don't know what their mindset is when they walk in the door on that first day. That's where our leadership requires us to remember that everybody has a story. That's why your opening day matters so much. Your staff's not listening as much to the words as they are asking questions that they may never say out loud. Sometimes your staff is sitting there thinking, can I trust these folks? Are they going to support me when things get tough? Man, I hope this year is the one that I get really, really treated like a professional. Those are questions that get answered long before anybody remembers what's in the strategic plan. People don't feel valued because we tell them that they're valued. They feel valued because of how we consistently treat them. And I think that's part of why that opening day matters so much. If we just sit and simply lecture for 4 hours, that's not how we want them to feel. That's not how we want to treat them. And I know for me, one of the mistakes I made early in my career was thinking clarity alone was what created that commitment. I can explain the vision. I can give you the test results and the data and all of that kind of stuff. I can tell you why we're going a certain direction, but that is not what creates buy-in. That is not what gets them to feel like, yes, I can do this. I can be a part of this. I'm excited to be a part of this. Now, it's connection is what does that. People are much more willing to follow leaders who make them feel seen, heard, valued, and trusted. So before you finalize that agenda, ask yourself a different question. When my teachers drive home after that first day back, what story do I want them telling at the dinner table? What feeling do I want them to have? How do I want them to feel coming back the next day? Do you want them walking away, getting in their car and thinking, wow, we covered a lot of material today? Or do you want them feeling like, I can't wait to get started? That's two very different experiences. Design the second one, because culture isn't built through a lot of content. Culture is built through intentional experiences. That brings me to the fourth commitment. Protect your calendar before somebody else takes ownership of it. Man, I think back, especially my first year as the building principal, and maybe the thing that I got taught the most on my own was you got to protect your calendar. You got to protect your time. I get lost even thinking about it because I just quietly drifted away that year because I was constantly being pulled in 100 different directions. Leaders struggle for that very reason. They don't stop caring. They don't stop working. They just stop protecting their time. I mean, I really thought when I became principal that being available to everybody was what great leaders did. Keep the door open, open door policy, right? Well, when I did that, people walked in constantly and every interruption felt important. The truth was they weren't important to me. They were important to somebody else. But then I took it on. Every request deserved my immediate attention. Every email that pinged, I got to make sure I respond to that right away. Heck, I was the guy who had 2 cell phones, my district phone and my personal phone. And for some silly reason, both of them had my work email on them, right? But I bet you do that too. See, the thing is, I thought I was leading, but what I was actually doing was just reacting. Finally, one day I realized something, and a lot of this came from working with my leadership coach, but I had spent so much of my time solving other people's priorities. I was almost never in classrooms. My coach even asked me that. He's like, Darrin, do you want to be a firefighter or do you want to be a leader? Because if you want to be a leader, you need to be in these classrooms. Man, that hit me hard. Because back to something I asked you guys earlier, what are your top 3 priorities? I know I probably would have said one of my top 3 priorities is being an instructional leader. And if that was true, why did my calendar not reflect that? Why did my use of time not reflect that? But that was reality. Here's what I've learned since. Your calendar is not a scheduling tool. In a lot of ways, it's a leadership document. Now, if you were to reflect on your calendar, go back and look at a month during last school year. What would you say when you do that it tells you spent the most time on? And whatever it's saying, then that's what you were saying mattered most. Was it things like meetings or classroom visits, coaching your teachers, building your team? The calendar always tells the truth. That's just the way it goes. Your calendar tells the truth. Every interruption by itself may seem harmless. It's just a phone call. It's just a meeting. It's just an email. It's just a request. And then suddenly you're 6 weeks into the school year wondering why you haven't done the work that you said mattered the most. See, nobody intends to be reactive. They just don't put boundaries on things. Nobody intends to fall into the cycle of chaos. But those interruptions, those become habit. Those habits become your routines. Before you know it, your staff learns, this is how I access the leader. Your leadership team learns, hey, this is what gets the leader's attention. Man, your school begins operating around your availability instead of your priorities. So let me ask you this. Who's going to lead your calendar this year? Will it be you or will it be everybody else? Because if everyone else gets unrestricted access to your time, they also get unrestricted access to your leadership. And that's way too important for you to give away. Take control of it. Take ownership of it. Before the year starts, block your classroom visits. Protect your coaching conversations time. Schedule in time to think. Schedule in time to plan with your leadership team. And don't apologize for it. It's not a weakness. Those are not empty spaces. Those are leadership items that are so critical. Put them on the calendar. Treat them like a meeting with your superintendent. Some of the most important decisions you'll make this year won't happen in meetings in general. They're going to happen because you finally gave yourself time to think. So block that time. Make sure your calendar reflects more of your priorities than the time you spend reacting. Make sure your calendar protects that time. 5th commitment. Prepare your presence, not just your plans. Something's going to go wrong this year. Actually, several things are going to go wrong this year. You already know that. The question isn't whether challenges are coming. The question is how, what, and who will your staff see when those challenges arrive? Something I've learned over time is your staff rarely remembers every decision you make in difficult moments. But what they do remember is how you showed up. When you have a tough time, when something really important is taking place, do you stay calm? Do you listen? Are you somebody that inspires confidence in your presence? Or did your anxiety become everybody else's? That was something for me, I'll tell you, that when I look back, I thought presence initially was just about visibility. It was just about walking the halls, just about being in classrooms and attending events, just being seen. I'm at the basketball game. And those things matter, don't get me wrong. But I think what I realized was there were days where I walked the hallways and mentally, I wasn't even in the building. I was thinking about budget or master schedule. I was thinking about a tough board meeting the night before. I was thinking about maybe a staffing concern that I had and the conversations that I needed to have after school or whatever. I was physically present. Mentally, I was absent. I wish I would have given my people more of the attention that they deserved rather than giving off busy energy. I've talked about that here on the podcast before, that busy energy. right? That's the thing when people come up to you and they say, "Hey, Darrin, I know you're busy, but," if you've ever heard that, you're giving off busy energy. That one finally dawned on me. And I think that realization actually changed me, because the reality is people will remember your presence. They may not remember what you intended to do. They may not even know what you intended to do, but they're certainly going to remember what your presence felt like. See, your presence is a choice, and the emotional state that you show up with is contagious. If you show up with busy energy, if you show up panic's going to spread. Busy energy spreads. If you show up with a bit of a cynical attitude, that's going to spread. But if you show up inspiring hope, that hope is going to spread. A lot of times your teachers lean into and borrow confidence from you as the leader until they find their own, if they need that. I think one of the greatest compliments I ever received from a teacher was one who said, "You know, Darrin, when things get tough, I know you're going to be there." And I know she wasn't complimenting the school improvement plan. And I would guarantee she wasn't complimenting my faculty meetings, right? She had simply said in her own way that she trusted me. That's leadership, folks. You know, your staff doesn't need you to be perfect, but they certainly need you to be present. They need you to listen, to learn alongside them. They need you to be the one who models the resilience that you're expecting and asking everyone else to demonstrate. So before this year starts, prepare yourself with that mindset, the attitude, the patience. Think about how you're going to respond. Really spend some time when you're out doing that walk through the building on that Sunday before everybody shows up. Give yourself some scenarios. What if something like this happens? How am I going to respond? How can I be the calm, confident leader my staff needs me to be when this scenario comes up? Because eventually those plans are going to be tested and your presence is going to be remembered. So be intentional about that. Think about 5 or 6 of those scenarios and how would I respond if that came my way? Because if you really think it through, that's one way to be much more proactive than reactive. All right. So as we wrap up today, my 5 commitments that I think every principal should make, and honestly, some amblings and wanderings mentally that I have taken during this episode. So thank you for making your way through that with me. I don't want you to think about your to-do list. You're going to get that taken care of, or you won't, but I think you will, because you always do. Instead of thinking about the to-do list, I want you to think about 3 really important questions. And the first one is, who do I need to become before my staff returns? That, I think, is a much better question than what do I need to accomplish before they get here? The second one, if someone followed me all throughout September, what would they conclude are my priorities? Right? We talked about that. If it was me, if it was a drone or anyone else, what would they think your priorities are? And that's going to come from so many places. Your presence, your conversations, your calendar, but most importantly, your actions. And then finally, how do I want people to feel after they spend time with me this year? Really think deeply about that one, because leadership is an experience. Every interaction is either going to build trust or it's going to erode it. And those moments add up. Every conversation, every classroom visit, every tough meeting, every just encouraging word. Leadership is rarely defined by one extraordinary moment. It usually is built through hundreds of ordinary ones. A few weeks from now, the buses are going to arrive and teachers are going to welcome students and the hallways are going to be noisy again and the classrooms are going to come to life. And before long, the rhythm of another school year is going to begin. Some things won't go according to plan, and that's okay. A lot of things will. Leadership has never been about eliminating uncertainty. It's about creating confidence in the middle of it. So before everybody comes back, remember these 5 commitments. Decide what matters most. Align your leadership team. Design the experience. Protect your calendar and prepare your presence. Because The schools that thrive this year won't necessarily be the ones that had the perfect opening week. They're going to be the schools that are led by people who intentionally prepared themselves before they ask everyone else to give their best. I hope sometime this fall, maybe during a classroom visit, or maybe while watching your students laugh in the hallway, or maybe even hearing your teachers collaborate together in a meeting, that you'll have one of those quiet moments where you can simply stop and look around and think, this. Yeah, this is why I became a principal. Because purpose is what sustains us, not the paperwork, not the meetings, certainly not budgets. It's your purpose. And I'll leave you with the same thought that I opened with today. You are not preparing the building. You are preparing yourself and your leadership team to lead the people who will make the building successful. Please don't lose sight of that. So if today's conversation encouraged you, I would love it if you shared this episode with another principal or assistant principal or superintendent who is getting ready for the school year. My hope is that this becomes one of those conversations that leaders return to every July, every August, not because it's full of great new ideas, but because it reminds you of the things that matter the most. As always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your leadership journey. That is certainly a responsibility I do not take lightly. Until next time, thank you for joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Get out there, have a road to awesome week.